My last question is about the sheer volume of violations. You know, I've heard a lot of the stories that you shared. Some of them were new to me. And what stuck out to me was the ruses, the getting a call saying you have a box on your doorstep. There was a daycare worker in my community who was working, and someone came in and said, oh my gosh, it was a woman. There's been a car crash in the parking lot. We need your help. And she went outside and was detained for several hours by ICE before they figured out that she is, in fact, a U.S. citizen, and was returned, terrified, to the daycare. Can you talk more about these ruses? We've seen some rumors that are possibly real or not, but we've seen real ones. Can you just talk about the ones that you've documented or verified?
Mr. Bueller?
If the memo that DHS has circulated has been circulated internally and from reporting that we have seen, not through documented means and in ways that would not be FOIable, Freedom of Information Act requestable, and nor has it been published, nor has it been brought forward into court, and we'll let you make inferences on the defensibility of that position given how it's been treated. But what we're seeing on the ground, these ruses, is to lure people out of protected spaces that would be protected by warrant requirements. But those follow-up detentions, even after the ruses, as I mentioned in my initial testimony, the necessity under the Fourth Amendment and in immigration statute requires agents for these detention to have probable cause that the person is both removable and a flight risk. And so as you look at these cases, you look at these individuals who've been here sometimes for decades, who have family ties to the area, who have work histories, who have community involvement. What flight risk is there? What probability of removal is there? Do these agents know who they've stopped? How do you know that a person is removable if you do not know who you have stopped? How do you know a person is a flight risk if you do not know who you have stopped? And those determinations are being made after the fact. They're not being made prior to the detention as required by the Fourth Amendment and as required by federal immigration law. Thank you.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you. Last question. This is a funky piece of law, but are statements made on Twitter or social media by the U.S. government considered official statements by the government?
Mr. Bueller? Ms. Nelson?
I don't have a full legal answer for you on this one. I would note that in a recent Supreme Court discussion or oral argument regarding the validity of the removal of a Fed chair, the U.S. government took the position that the Fed chair had received notice because of a Truth Social post and that she had not responded to that notice with a presumably Truth Social post of her own. So I do not know if there is a law. I cannot cite a law or a case on point. I believe this federal government does believe in governing by post, or that at least a post is an official statement of the United States government.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would also maybe say there's been some Supreme Court cases about whether elected officials can block or remove comments on posts that they make about official business. And so if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly from the Supreme Court, they do see official communications from governments as official communications, which is why I just want to end with this. This is official statement from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and it says, America, after 100 million deportations. Are there 100 million undocumented people in the United States of America?
Mr. Bueller, Ms. Decker.
Chair, Madam Chair, Senator, I do not believe there are 100 million immigrants in the United States of America, documented or undocumented.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't do math in public, so I'm not going to ask you to. But if one was to achieve 100 million people to remove from this country, and they were targeting Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous people, they would have to target U.S. citizens, like we've seen in Minnesota, yes?
Mr. Bueller, Ms. Decker?
Madam Chair, Senator, if there are not 100 million immigrants in this country, I don't know how you get to 100 million without targeting citizens.
Thank you.
Senator Marty, I have you on my list, but I have a question for you, Ms. Decker. You've been doing this work. You didn't just start in the last 6 weeks as we've had this surge. but is this normal? Like, is what you're seeing in court, is this the normal process that your clients who are going through the immigration process, are they experiencing the same things they would normally experience?
Madam Chair, no. I mean, I can, obviously we could spend a lot of time talking about general, overarching issues with sort of the immigration court process. But there have been serious issues with the way that the immigration court has changed under this current administration, with the way that the process has changed, with policy changes, with changes in the judges and the appellate process. It has been drastically different, and has become very, very difficult in terms of just due process and the ability for people to effectively make their cases before the immigration court.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple minutes ago, Mr. Baylor, mentioned that for detention, an agent has to both have probable cause that the person is ordered for deportation and probable cause that they're a flight risk. Is that what I understood?
Mr. Bueller.
Madam Chair, Senator Marty, probable cause to believe the person is removable and that they are a flight risk, yes.
Senator Marty.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, the point that I think is you follow that up by saying they don't even know who they're going after right now, let alone those two conditions. So, that's what I seem to be hearing, and that's what I gather you're saying as well.
Mr. Bueller.
Madam Chair, Senator Marty, from the cases that we have published, primarily in our Hussein v. Noam case, most of the individuals detained most of the individuals detained were not known to ICE prior to their stop and detention. Most of them are citizens, but most of the time, these clients, these declarants, are the ones to inform the ICE officer of who they have stopped.
Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we start drawing to the conclusion of this first part of the hearing, I just wanted to describe, I think, what we've established here. Spoiler alert, I think we've established that what we're experiencing in Minnesota with the deployment of 3,000 to 4,000 ICE and Border Patrol agents is that this is not at all about immigration, interestingly, despite the claims to the contrary. The fact that we've seen the arrest and detention of numerous people, immigrants here who have legal status, who are going through legal processes, who have no history of any sort of violations of the law in their background, being picked up and detained, sometimes in the most brutal manner, in violation of their rights, without access to counsel, being swept out of the state. The arrest and detention of numerous people who are simply in public exercising a number of their constitutional rights and freedoms without due cause, without access to due process, etc. The extreme mismatch, and thank you for helping us with the math, Senator Mayquade, of agents who are here, who were just announced out of the clear blue sky that they would be descending on Minnesota. 3,000 to 4,000 agents, a level of absurdity that just defies credulity. The fact that the claims of 100 million people need to be detained and deported, population of the entire country is about 343 million people. Madam Chair, I think what we've established is that there are a number of claims of why this is happening. We'll get to those later. First one we're dealing with here is this really about immigration? Our Department of Corrections shows that the number of people who ICE wants is far less than the number that are actually in incarceration and have devoted an entire web page to debunk the claims and the myths and the lies being made by the federal government and showing full cooperation where that opportunity is made available to honor those detainer requests. And so, Madam Chair, I think we can only be left to conclude that this is about a projection of federal power in an effort to intimidate, in an effort to overturn our system of laws and due process. And Madam Chair, it feels like we have the very foundations of our freedoms and our democracy under attack by the federal government, and our personal and physical safety is being endangered by our own federal government. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Kupek.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have kind of two quick questions here. I'm just wondering about under what legal authority, or is it unconstitutional to kind of sweep people up and remove them down to, let's say, Texas, to a camp or prison down there? And then if they are found, to be able to be released when they are down in Texas, is there any obligation by the federal government to get those people back to Minnesota? Thank you.
Ms. Nelson?
Madam Chair, Senator, so every situation is different. However, you heard my colleague, Ms. Decker, talk about what we're seeing happening is that people are being taken into custody and very swiftly removed to Texas and moved to Texas in order to, the predictable result is that these folks have a very difficult time accessing counsel. They have a difficult time fighting their removal case. And so I think when the final analysis comes in and we look at each of these individual cases, we will see a number of them where the initial detention was not lawful. The Advocates for Human Rights has filed a second lawsuit. Actually, it was preceding the access to counsel case, challenging the detention and transfer of folks in this, people with refugee status, people who are not necessarily subject to detention, and the removal of them to Texas in this system called Operation Paris. And so I think that we will see a number of unlawful actions by this jurisdiction. In that advocate's lawsuit, the federal district judge Tunheim just yesterday issued an order prohibiting this kind of behavior for refugees. And so, yeah, there may be some circumstances where this conduct is lawful, but also a number of them where it is not. And
go ahead.
I can't answer the question about whether there's an obligation to bring them back. That may be something that would need to be fought through the Federal Tort Claims Act process.
Senator Kupek?
Thank you very much.
Senator Mann?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we have fairly solidly established that this is not about crime, and perhaps very little to do with immigration either. This is a fairly racist campaign of the federal government against black and brown people in this country. So, very quick question with a one-word answer, if you will. Is the federal government arresting, detaining, or deporting lawful Minnesota residents without any criminal records?
Stecker?
Madam Chair, Senator, yes.
Mr. Bueller?
Madam Chair, Senator Mann, arresting and detaining certainly. Deportations, I don't have a record of that at this point.
Ms. Nelson?
Madam Chair, Senator, I believe yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for your testimony and your helpful answers to our questions. We appreciate the work that you're doing and appreciate your time today. We will move to have Chase Ironeyes and Taomi Zhang come up to the testifier table. While you are getting settled at the table, we're going to go to Linus Chen on Zoom. Mr. Chen works the University of Minnesota Law School Detainees Rights Clinic. Mr. Chen, thank you so much for joining us. If you would please introduce yourself for the committee and then present the testimony of what you're seeing.
Good morning, members of the Minnesota Senate Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. My name is Linus Chan, and I am a clinical professor of law at the University of Minnesota School of Law. And as part of the Binger Center for New Americans, I run a clinic representing people who are either detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement or are in danger of being detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So I've been asked today to provide some testimony before your committee. So I'll just jump into it unless
Yes,
there's
please.
something. Yes, of course. So some of the questions that have been on the front of minds for a lot of people who unfortunately now are being confronted with what immigration enforcement can look like is, well, how is this impacting people on the ground? What does this mean for people who are the targets of this sort of aggressive messaging and enforcement? So the biggest thing is fear. This sort of policies and initiatives, which has started almost immediately after President Trump began his second term, has involved the deliberate practice of trying to increase the fear among people who are non-citizens in the United States as much as possible to drive what they call a self-deportation. They created an entire app that's supposed to encourage self-deportation, and then they have used and weaponized detention in order to drive people to do so. And they are doing this knowing that many of the same people that are trying to make the choice between whether or not to stay in the United States or not are having to do so when they have a legal right to fight their case, when they have the legal right to go in front of an immigration judge to ask for asylum, when they have the legal right to go ahead and try to get a green card because they're married to a U.S. citizen, when they have the legal right to do any number of things which Congress, and not ICE, and not the president, but Congress has actually laid out as the proper process to make some of these decisions. Nonetheless, this administration has decided to weaponize the use of detention. They've expanded the use of detention. They've deliberately argued, both in court and in other places, that they can mandatorily detain, meaning not afford people the right to ask for bond for an enormously huge amount of people that the law 30 years ago would not have authorized, and yet they are expanding the use of detention specifically to put fear into people. They are doing so even after for a group of people in which they promised they wouldn't. This includes special immigrant juveniles, people who've gotten a determination, not only that they are special immigrant juveniles, but that the government has said, we are giving you what's called deferred action. That deferred action was supposed to be a promise from the government that says, we will not try to deport you while we give you deferred action. This includes victims of serious crimes, U visa holders who have cooperated with law enforcement for the investigation and detection of crimes. This has included trafficking victims, people who are trafficking victims and been given deferred action. We have seen in the last few weeks more and more of those people being detained. And I'm sure we're all aware, we've seen their use of detention of children. All of this is a deliberate way to create fear among everyone in the community. One of the most shocking things that I can say that has happened is that I have been fielding many calls from people who should not be afraid. Not only am I fielding calls from people who are lawful permanent residents, people who have lawful status to be in the United States, but I'm fielding phone calls from U.S. citizens, people who have naturalized, or people who have been adopted and got their U.S. citizenship through adoption, people who have documents but are being afraid that they will be detained by the government and that they would, even if they would ultimately be released, that they might have to spend, as we've seen in the news, not just hours, but in some case days of detention fighting for their ability to stay. And we know this in the backdrop that this government does not view citizens equally. They are in court right now trying to take away U.S. citizenship for people who are born in the United States, an understanding that is held since the 14th Amendment. And yet they are deliberately asking the Supreme Court of the United States to take away citizenship of people who are not born here. So when earlier there was comments about the fact that this surge, metro surge, and the use of 3,000 new troops in our cities and in the state of Minnesota, it clearly is not to enforce immigration law. If they wanted to enforce immigration law, they would not try to make it more difficult for people to go to their hearings. They would not try to make it more difficult for people to, in fact, assess and actually present themselves both in court and to ICE. Instead, they have created an atmosphere of fear and an atmosphere where they make the entire legal process delegitimized. They are making it seem very clearly that their message is the law does not apply to you, and we will make sure that you will not be able to stay in the United States. So those are the things that I'm seeing. I'm seeing children U.S. citizen children being kept home and not going to school. I have seen people not getting health care, including pregnant mothers. I have seen and heard of people not afraid to go get groceries. And again, this is not just people who are undocumented or who have no legal claim to stay in the United States. These are people with the legal claim. Just last night, a federal judge had to file an injunction against the U.S. government for detaining refugees, not for trying to remove them, because the federal government wasn't saying that they could remove them, but simply because they were refugees who applied to get their green cards. These are people who not only did everything the right way, but where the government itself is not even claiming that they can deport them. But what they are doing is detaining them. And that detention is what is driving fear in this community, and it's something that they are using to weaponize their enforcement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chan. Mr. Chan, I think you said this in your comments, but you were at the round table with us last week and talked about how you have seen, like, as you are supporting your clients who are going through the immigration process, going through the court process, you are seeing people being detained at those appointments. I am hearing from my colleagues across the aisle, all across this country, saying people just need to do it the right way. They need to do it the legal way if they only just followed the law. But that's not what you're seeing on the ground. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, they have made it very clear that that they are willing to break the promise of the United States, to break the trust of the United States. That should be something that every citizen and every person that cares about what this country means should be concerned about. Because in many of these cases, it was the U.S. government that explicitly invited people to come in a certain way. These are people with TPS. These are people who were paroled into the United States. And again, these are people in which we gave them documentation. We gave them bona fide determinations that said, don't worry, because you have applied And because you are following the rules and regulation, we will not try to detain you. We will not try to deport you as long as you remain law-abiding. And yet, despite the fact that they do all of those things, the United States government has decided to, in fact, break that promise and detain those folks anyway. And even when they later are forced to release them, they make no qualms that they will keep trying to do it again. And that is something that I am seeing. This has nothing to do with whether or not people are following it the right way. They are doing what Congress has said that they can do, and yet they are facing detention, removal, and in some cases, awful and terrible conditions once they are detained.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chan, for your testimony and for the work that you're doing. We'll move to Chase Iron Eyes. If you would please introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony.
Hamadak Yapi, Kola Yuha Chichab Naha Buju Ani. It is my distinct honor to greet you in the languages of the waters and the sacred lands that are now called Minnesota. My name is Chase Iron Eyes. I'm an attorney with the Sacred Defense Fund, and it's my privilege and honor to be invited to testify here today. I've been a part of the Native community here in Minneapolis for almost a month now. And I have family and relatives who live in South Minneapolis in Little Earth community. And as an attorney, I've been showing up every single day for our brothers and sisters, the good people of Minneapolis and St. Paul collectively who are under siege right now, because these are not normal times. We all wish, as an attorney, I certainly wish and I hope and I'm willing to assert and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We all take that oath, and I'm in the courtrooms, and I see us trying to act like we can live our lives as if they were peaceful, as if civil decorum was being observed. But what is being described, what was described by Senator Dibble, is a declaration of war on American people, on American families. What we are facing is an insurrection and an attempted overthrow of constitutional order. When we take a look back as American Indians, we committed ourselves to the United States of America. We signed treaties with the United States of America, and we swore to defend the United States of America forever. So as an attorney, as a human being, as a father, as a husband, when I see the integrity and the sanctity of the United States Constitution being overrun outside the scope of the law, outside the scope of constitutional authority, I have to ask myself, what am I willing to give? What am I willing to give to make sure that our people, the good people of Minneapolis-St. Paul and Minnesota and the United States and tribal nations, what are we willing to give to ensure that we have the right to speak freely, the right to press, the right of association, the right to peaceably assemble, to petition for redress? What am I willing to give to defend the vision and the dream of the founding fathers of the United States, who held that certain rights should be inalienable, that we should be willing to assert and defend those truths that are self-evident, that anybody here today that considers it a sacred duty and obligation to assert our rights as American people, that we have a sacred obligation to create a more perfect union. This is the gravity and the weight and the magnitude of a very live controversy, a constitutional crisis that is disturbing the peace of all Minnesotans right now. This is no small matter. And like the 19th generation keeper of the sacred white buffalo calf pipe, Orville Looking Horse says, it is no accident that you were born into this time, that you chose to incarnate spiritually here in this realm, in this plane. And my heart goes out to you because you have upon your shoulders, and you have the commitment of tribal nations who've already banned ICE from tribal lands and have said in a lawful manner that we will not contend with the illegalities and the criminal seizure of constitutional order. Everything that they're accusing the good people of Minnesota for violating is being done by those that we trust to uphold law and order. I want to thank you for your time today. I'm available. My organization is available for legislative pursuits. We look forward to filing amicus briefs to support the good state of Minnesota in your quest. I can't stress that enough, and I'm praying for all of us, and action is prayer. So God be with us. Thank you.
Senator Mayquade.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Iron Eyes, for being here. You mentioned that you've been here for a month, and is it my understanding, is it correct that you've been here for a month trying to locate the 3 men of the Oglala Sioux tribe who are being held by ICE or DHS, who are indigenous men? They are members of a tribe. Are you still searching for them?
Yes.
Mr. Iron Eyes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator. I received a phone call from elected officials of the Oglala Sioux tribe, and they were in town, and so they wanted to go to the detention center, to the Whipple Detention Center, to inquire as to the whereabouts of their tribal citizens. And we were not able to gain any clarity because these are people who are on the street. These are houseless relatives. Their names are unknown, and so at this time, we don't know where our people are. There are several other Native American people who've been profiled, clients of mine who've been profiled, who were mistaken and be told that they look like the Ecuadorian that they were hunting. You have people who work for the city who are Native American who are being profiled because really there's no way to tell the difference between the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Right. These are our cousins that are declared illegal and alien. They look just like us. So we are still looking for our people at this time.
Senator Mayquade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need everybody here, watching, live or later, to hear what Mr. Iron Eyes is saying. There are members of Native American tribes, the people who were here, who have always been here, who are still here, that are being held by this government. What authority does ICE have over Native Americans, over U.S. citizens? None. This is outrageous. And Mr. Iron Eyes, I want to thank you for coming here and continuing to work with elected officials and the tribes here to locate these members of your tribe. It is abhorrent that we are hearing this today. I just need everybody to know that. The history of indigenous people in this country is long and beautiful, and they are resilient. And this is not new for them. But we should all mark this moment that we are hearing from a lawyer and a leader who is telling us the United States government, DHS, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement continues to hold Native Americans. Unconscionable. Thank you, Mr. Iron Eyes.
Ms. Zhang, would you please introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony?
Good afternoon. My name is Tao Mei Shang. I'm the Executive Network Director for the Coalition of Asian American Leaders that's based here in Minnesota. We're a statewide organization that has over 5,800 network leaders throughout the state and a total of 10,000 in our network. Thank you for inviting me here today to share the experiences of our Asian American community. But before I start my testimony, I wanted to thank the Native tribal government for your support and for being out there protecting refugees and immigrants. I know you don't have to do it, but your willingness to do it and to fight for our freedom and our democracy is, I cannot thank you enough, so thank you. First, I want to say that I am not here alone. I'm here with dozens of other Asian American organizations, and I just want to acknowledge them. My CAL team, Transforming Generations, ADA, SEWA, CAPI, HAP, KOM, CFEN, which is a national organization. And I want to also acknowledge the former commissioner of the White House Initiative, Ka-Ying Yang, who's been working tirelessly her entire career to support and defend refugees, especially Southeast Asians. There are an estimated 6% of Asian Americans here in the state of Minnesota. And just to give you a number, it's 332,000 Asian Americans here in Minnesota. Hmong Americans make the largest population of Asian Americans, followed by Chinese Americans and Asian Indians. But 60% of that 332,000 are Southeast Asian, who came here after the secret war in Laos and the Vietnam War. I am Hmong American. I came here as a political refugee. I was born in Laos, then lived in a refugee camp for 3 years, and then resettled in Wisconsin. I've been a lifelong Midwesterner, and now I call Minnesota home. My dad is a janitor. He had 2 jobs to raise 11 kids. My mom is a factory worker who also had 2 jobs. My dad is also a veteran of the Vietnam War. He was a child soldier. He told me that he was carrying a gun that dragged on the floor because he was so small. He suffered bullet wounds, and because he was part of the military, we were the second wave to come to the United States, making us only the 3rd family to resettle in our small town in Wisconsin. My parents always knew we would never be American. They always told us, you don't have blue eyes, you don't have blonde hair, but you will be successful here. And so they put us through college. And I don't often talk about this, but I'm sharing this because my parents are very proud of it. I have 3 degrees. I went to Mount Holyoke, Columbia University, and University of Pennsylvania Law School. Very few people can say they have 3 degrees. Very few people can say they've gone to 2 Ivy League schools. But this is the resiliency and determination of my immigrant parents who came here as refugees, who are now in hiding in their home in Cottage Grove, who say that ICE officials actually reside in the next development next to their house. So my father, who is a child soldier, who fought for freedom and democracy before he even understood what democracy meant and votes every year, is now afraid in the country he fought for. So I share my successes with you because instead of recognizing the contributions of our refugee and immigrant communities in Minnesota particularly, but in this country overall, is very shameful. Instead, we're painted with a broad brush that we are violent criminals. All my colleagues who are here today on behalf of the Asian American community can tell you the percentage of violent criminals are few and far in between. But do we have some like any other community? Of course. We're human. So I want to share this human story and give you a human face so that you no longer drag our people like animals into detention centers. And in particular, I want to say, when will we be enough to be Americans? Is it enough when I have 3 degrees? Is it enough when my parents raise a surgeon, a CEO, a CFO, Professors, when will it be enough? For our brothers and sisters who are being detained. Earlier, Linus Chen said that people with removal orders, and many of the people we work with have removal orders. That means they can stay here legally until the federal government removes them to a country that will accept them. The majority of people we've been working with are Hmong, Lao, Cambodian, and Vietnamese, and many are working with the Karen and Karenni community. They came here as refugees fleeing their country because of political persecution. Now they're trying to be forced back into these countries that persecuted them because they aligned with the US government. Many immigrant and refugee communities, not just the Southeast Asian or Asian American community, are here as a result of the geopolitical wars that were created by the US government to maintain their US world power positions. So many are not here willingly. They fled here for safety, and now they live in chaos. I want to share a few examples of the individuals who have removal orders. People call them illegal. They did not come here illegally. They came here with status. They remain here in status, but they can be removed at any moment. They check in every 6 months with an ICE officer or every year. During their check-ins, they report if they've done drugs, committed any offenses, so on and so forth. Many have said they go into a check-in and they're able to leave, and then the very next day or a few days later, they're dragged out of their workplaces, or ICE officers force themselves into their homes and humiliate them in front of their children who are crying in the background, in front of their coworkers, their bosses. So now they've lost their job and they're seen as a violent criminal when they've already done their time. Many have been out for 10 to 15 years. Many engaged in these crimes when they were teenagers, living in the worst neighborhoods in Minnesota and throughout the country, in violent situations where they were trying to survive. And so these violent criminals, today, they're fathers, brothers, breadwinners. So the majority of people we work with are actually men. They're heads of households. So imagine taking the head of a household from your family, and now you've lost a means of being able to survive. I want to say also that this deportation and criminalization of the Southeast Asian community started even when we first came to the US in 1975. We came here as a result of the Vietnam War, and the US was extremely chaotic. And my parents have faced racial discrimination since they landed in this country. In 2017, we saw a surge of Southeast Asians being detained and deported. And we were already organizing then. But the scale in which we're seeing the violence today is unprecedented. And I stand before you extremely nervous because I am so afraid for my kids who are 16 and 14, who go to school, a very white school, I must say, and they're worried their teachers and their peers will not know how to protect them if ICE comes. And they are born in Minnesota and are US citizens. My parents, who are both citizens, are afraid and live in hiding. And so the violence against Asian Americans and other immigrant and refugee communities are not isolated to just this time. It's just been so blatant, so violent, so vicious, that when you remove the immigrants and refugees from this state cannot function. Do you guys hear that? If you remove all the refugees and immigrants from this state will not be able to function. We create billions in tax dollars to make sure that Minnesotans can live a comfortable, luxurious life with peace and without violence. And so I want to say that the organizations that I named, we are all organizing together, and we provide emergency legal triage support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've been in communication with individuals who've been in detention, both in Texas and here. And I want to say that the individuals who were in Texas, there are 6 tents. There's over 1,000 people in each tent. There's nowhere to sleep. They can't call their attorney or their family members because there are not enough phones and the lines are too long. They know people who've died in the tents, and the individuals who have been released, ICE has told them, you have to find your own way back to Minnesota. And so now their families are scrambling to get the resources to bring them back home. For the individuals in detention here in Minnesota, they say the conditions are much better, but every day they see a new load of immigrants and refugees coming into the detention center and then being removed within 48 hours to a place that has more room because the detention centers here are so full. One individual in the detention center said he just wants to come back to work. He works for a union here in Minnesota. He's a construction worker and he has 4 kids. He was taken before Christmas, could not spend time with his family, and now his mortgage payments are delayed and he doesn't know how his family's gonna stay in his house. So I just wanna say I urge you to act. You have power. Holding this hearing was a very powerful act, and I thank you for that. We urge our congressional members to act. They have power. They're 1/3 of branch of government that can hold the president, ICE, DHS accountable. And so my last request is do not treat us as animals. I am a human. My brothers and sisters are humans. Immigrants and refugees are humans. And so if you must detain someone, at least remember they are not an animal and treat them with dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zhang. I find myself these days going back and forth between heartbreak and rage. And I felt both when you said, Ms. Zhang, when will we be Americans? Because the two of you sitting here and talking about your communities and the way that you are supporting our cities and our residents and your own people, but also all of the people around them, is the most American thing that I can think of. This country has a strong history of both brutality and also incredible strength and resilience. And the lessons that we have been able to employ across the state of Minnesota in the last weeks have been guided by the knowledge of the 11 tribal nations that we have here, the Black Americans who learned through the civil rights movement, the Southeast Asian immigrants who fled dictatorships, and our Latino brothers and sisters who fled gang violence and drugs in their communities, and our Somali and Eritrean refugees here who fled war. This is a country of immigrants, all of us, except for the native tribes who have been here, and they are leading in this moment and protecting those of us who came even through the brutality that this country has shifted onto their people. I want to thank you deeply for coming today and for the work that you're doing. And, the last 6 weeks, I have never been more proud of Minnesota and the way that we have come together, all of us. And I just am really grateful for you being here, but also think as we move through this session, we need your partnership to build the strongest protections, to understand how we can partner together to make our communities safe. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your, thank your father for his service. I remember I was talking to one of my colleagues and I said, so if I see a Hmong person, it's very, very likely I'm looking at either a veteran or the descendants of a veteran. And that rings true for me right now. Can I just ask you to reread the part that you had about the tents? Just
Yes.
read that again, please.
Ms. Jean?
So there are 6 tents in Texas, and there are over 1,000 people in each tent.
Ms. Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to read a definition to you. A concentration camp is a facility where large numbers of people, often political prisoners or members of targeted groups, including ethnic minorities, are kept in harsh conditions, typically without legal proceedings. Does that definition define what people are experiencing in those tents?
Ms. Jean?
Madam Chair, yes.
Thank you both for your testimony. Oh, Senator Dibble.
Madam Chair, I just wanted Madam Chair, I just am feeling a deep sense of gratitude and a great deal of emotion. I'm devastated by the concluding comments of Ms. Zhang, in which she said, "Do not treat us as animals." And Minnesotans, I hope you're hearing this. Someone is sitting at the table of a Senate committee hearing, pleading with us to see her and her family and her community as human. This is what's happening in our state today. At the hands of our own federal government in the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I would like to call up Laura Jadid, as well as Mayors Nadia Mohammed and Mary Supple. Ms. Jadid, if you would begin by introducing yourself for the record and presenting your testimony.
Yes, thank you. My name is Laura Jadid. I'm a freelance journalist, and it is my honor to be here today. I would like to apologize for being late on my way here. I ran into an ICE raid and stopped to see what was going to happen. There were many Minnesotans who came out of their houses, some of them in sweatpants and Crocs, to make a lot of noise and alert their neighbors that there was danger, and after about 20 minutes, the agents left. During this time, they were in a SUV with tinted windows. We could not see who they are, and that ties in to what I'd like to say today.
Ms. Jadid, could you just pull the microphone?
Oh, yes, I apologize. Is that
Thank
better?
you. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Yes. But this ties into what I'd like to talk about today, which is that we do not know who these people are. They hide their faces, and any attempt to figure out who they are is labeled as doxing. But it's not just that we don't know who they are. It seems that ICE themselves may not know who they are. I'm here today because I wrote an article in which I applied to ICE. This was supposed to be an article about a hiring expo in Arlington, Texas back in August, and I was going to report this by submitting a resume, and I assumed I would get through the first round. I'm a veteran. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and on paper, I look pretty good. However, if you look up my name at all, you will quickly learn that I have been very critical of the Trump administration generally, and ICE specifically. I'd also like to note, this is relevant later, that I am the daughter of an immigrant from Syria, and when I was in the military, my security clearance was delayed by several months because they needed to check to make sure that I didn't have ties to a foreign government. So I assumed that I would get through the first round. They would find out one of these 2 things, and then it would be the end. So I went in. There was a 6-minute interview in which I was asked very basic questions like my name, my date of birth, how long I had served in the military, and my duty station preference. That was it. On the conclusion of that, they took my resume and said that I would be hearing from them probably in a couple days. They were prioritizing people with law enforcement experience, and I would get processed later. I went home not expecting to hear back. And so when they did ultimately send a tentative offer for a job, about a week later, I missed it. It sank to the bottom of my inbox. If I had seen it at the time, what I would have seen was that I had 48 hours to accept this job offer, that I needed to fill out a great deal of paperwork, and that if I did not do this, my journey through this hiring process would be over. And I did none of these things. I did not fill out the affidavit that stated I had never committed a domestic violence felony. I did not fill out my background check paperwork or my physical paperwork. I did not accept the offer. And yet, 3 weeks later, I received an email that said in order to continue my hiring process, I needed to submit to a drug test. This was news to me. It was also unfortunate timing. I live in New York City where cannabis is legal, and I had partaken 6 days before this test was due. However, I decided to take it anyway. Why not waste some of their money and see what happens? So I went ahead and did it. And at this point, I was expecting to hear back, because when you fail a drug test, you are usually notified. So I was waiting for that phone call. And 9 days later, when I didn't receive it, I decided to log into the ICE hiring portal through usajobs.com to see how my application was doing. And what I discovered was that according to this portal, I had received a final offer, I had accepted the final offer, and I had an entry on duty date of September 30th, 2025. I was checking this on October 3rd, 2025. Most disturbingly of all to me is that under the section that listed the various steps that I had completed, my background check was listed as completed as of October 6th, 3 days in the future. Again, because of my ties to Syria, one would expect that they would have some questions, that it would not be completed without paperwork being filled out or anything like that. Now, it is, in a sick way, a bit funny that ICE hired a journalist who disagrees with them and is very vocal about it on the internet and in various articles published for the New Republic, The Nation, and outlets like that. What's not funny, and what is in fact extremely disturbing, is that there is apparently no accountability from the start of this process to the end. Unless I was the only person to experience this glitch, which I find very unlikely, ICE does not know who is on these streets. We do not know if there are people with domestic violence felonies carrying guns in our community. Recently, another ICE agent was found to be guilty of possessing CSAM materials, and these people, unvetted, are in charge of detention centers where people will be neither believed nor missed. I would expect the Department of Homeland Security to take this very, very seriously. This should not be a partisan issue. If an agency of the government is not vetting its agents, I would expect that to be an issue, even if your only concern is the safety of ICE agents, making sure that the people to their left and right are, in fact, safe people to be there. Instead, the Department of Homeland Security responded through their official channel, X, and stated that this was a lazy lie, that I had been extended a tentative offer, and that none of what I was saying was true. I posted a screen capture of the ICE portal and asked if they would like to explain, which they still have not done. It is highly unusual, in my opinion, in my experience, based on everything I know, for a department to dismiss this sort of thing out of hand as a lie without investigating it. And I think that speaks to a very deep problem here. The Department of Homeland Security does not seem to care about the safety of anybody involved in this process, not fellow ICE agents, and certainly not the people of the cities that these agents are terrorizing. This is not an issue of a few bad apples or leadership. This is a deep systemic dysfunction in an agency that is being used in a way that is reminiscent of the Gestapo. And it is my hope that my experience can shed some light on the cavalier disregard this organization has for human life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deed. I will say I'm an avid Slate reader. I read your story minutes after it came out and was horrified. There's been additional reporting that's come out since then that there are at least 30 individuals that are employed by ICE or Customs and Border Patrol that have, there's 30 of them, that have crimes including sex trafficking of children, aggravated assault, robbery, rape, torture, kidnapping, sexual abuse of a minor, and possession and production of, you say CSAM, I'm just going to say it out loud, child sexual abuse material, with a majority of those crimes happening in the last 2 years. So I really want folks to hear what Ms. Jadid is saying, because it's not just one slip up. We are seeing a culture of horrors, and then we're seeing that play out on our streets. So I thank you so much for your reporting and for going through the process to even bring this to light. Just making sure there's no other member questions before I go on. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, Senator Rasmussen. Senator Rasmussen, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just because we had a member of the committee reference concentration camps, and we also had a testifier here talk about the Gestapo, I just wanted to read a small excerpt from the Holocaust Museum here in the United States. And this is just a short excerpt. They had responded to Governor Walz invoking the memory of Anne Frank as he described the situations here in Minnesota.